Hey everybody, John O'Connor here again. If you're watching this and you haven't seen After the Dice 1 yet, please pause this video and go look that one up first. This installment of videos is going to be what happened on my Thursday night with my group. So it helps if you watch the first one first, the second one second, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining and reintroducing characters that I talk about in another video. With that in mind, let's get started with what happened last night. Alright, so 1 week after the opening of the last campaign, and all my players' general consensus was I didn't get to play my character fully the way I wanted to. So I was like, okay, well that's what we're going to do this week. You have another opportunity. All of your ideas are still loose and fluid. Your personality really hasn't been designed yet because you haven't had enough time with the character. But understand, behaviors and quirks that you wrote on your paper and didn't explore are going to kind of go by the wayside, and things that you're starting to do now are going to become your character's personality because of the way you play it. So if you have an idea for your character, start playing it now. And so with that in mind, Nicole, Carly, and Jonathan all kind of went, okay, well, we're going to try harder to play our characters. Carly was kind of at the far end of the spectrum going, okay, I really need to get away from Vitani, and Jonathan going, yeah, I really should just have him a little more assertive. So, I mean, that was all. And Nicole kind of just fell in the middle of like, okay, I want this character to be their own, not something I've tried to play before. So, night starts off, and I open right where I left off. I go, alright, well, what are you going to do with this book? And they have a conversation about it, and they're thinking, well, which way should we go, what should we do? While having this conversation, then Jason goes, let's go back to my place, and we'll open it there. And they all go, okay. So, they're going to go open this book. Jace takes out some wire cutters or equivalent of in the time and breaks all the wires off the book, opens it up, and they start looking at it. Well, what they notice is that on the top right corners of the book are these onyx stones that are embedded into it, except on the back cover there's only one. And that each side of the cover is embedded heavily with diamond dust. Well, with no knowledge of the arcane, they don't know what any of that means, and they flip through the pages and they see a bunch of runic writing. It looks like wizard's notes, but none of them are wizards, so they're still, oh, you know, what do we do? So Jace gets the idea, why don't we go back to the mages district and find a well-to-do mage? Somebody with just a little more talent, you know, than the one with the Wandering Wand, you know, and have him discover that. He came up with that idea, and I was like, well, your character would know that Thad, T-H-A-D, Thad, is a serving member of the Mages Union, part of their council, and he happens to own a shop called the Two-Headed Fox. So they take it over to Thad, and while Thad's a half-elf, they take it over there, and Thad just acts like he has no time for them, kind of thing. He comes up on a hovering golden disc, he has his hookah, and he's sets it down, the floating disc follows him, and he looks at the book, notices things, kind of holds it by one end of the cover and starts shaking. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? And he's looking at the bindings. You know, he's being a little more rough than they were hoping he'd be. And after they're like, well, you don't have a gentle touch. He's like, what do you want with it? And they said, well, what do you mean? Like, well, do you want to sell it? Or are you asking a question? You know, what are you doing here? Well, can you tell us anything about the book? And he just says, it's not worth my time to explain a book to you. And he starts talking down to everybody, and Jace, trying to be the leader, is all like, well, could you, he's trying to be diplomatic, and Thaddeus is like, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a swordsmith by trade, and then, I also work for the guard. He's like, alright, so you're bronze, not brains, next. And he's just very insulting to everybody. And so they're like, well, we'll take our business elsewhere, and they take the book, and they're leaving, and he's like, I will give you just one piece of free advice. Onyx stones and diamond dust are the key components needed to make stone skin. And he says, isn't it kind of odd that the material components for a spell are kept in the spell book and not in a spell pouch? And they're like, oh shit, that is odd. But they still leave his shop because he's an asshole. And they leave, when they're leaving, they notice that this figure in a purple cloak is running side to them. They're facing outside, this thing's coming this way, and there's two guards chasing. Well, Jace, seeing two other city guards, goes, well, obviously this person did something wrong, and does a running tackle at them. When he does the running tackle, he subdues her, and they take off the hood, and it's a half-orc female. This half-orc female is rather strange, though, because she's well-groomed, well-bathed. She is only about 5'6", and weighs probably less than 140 pounds. So she has a very small, almost petite frame, and nothing about her screams out, giant orc, or half-orc. And so they start engaging the guards in dialogue and kind of put her to the side for a second because they think she can only speak orc. And then Jace goes, well, I can speak orc. And they start asking, and what happens is, in Lexington, most adventurers get something called, will buy a 42 gold pack called the Mueller Adventuring Pack, which has a lot of basic things that any adventurer would need. What it doesn't include, though, is soap, clothing, sewing needles, little odds and ends that when the pack was put together, people just didn't think that those things were needed. You bought those things separately. Well, this half-orc was conned by a halfling saying, well, no, the pack has everything, the pack has everything. And they're getting her side of the story, but she's rather abrupt and angry and snarling and snapping, both in common and orc now. And so the guards are ready to take her away. Because the law of the land is theft. The minimum you'll get is physical harm in the form of canings or 15 years in jail. So the punishment varies, but it's rather harsh in this town. So they're ready to take her away, and Jace is trying to be, all, well, I'm a city guard too. We should go investigate more. And the guards begrudgingly follow him. They go to the shopkeep. The halfling's all like, oh, you found the thief. Well, thank you so much. That's the one. Let's send her away. And Jace is like, well, let's talk about this. So Jace is trying to get the halfling side of the story. The halfling is explaining how the simple half-orc just didn't understand the trade and, trying just to downplay her. Well, the half-orc over there is like, listening to this. It's all being said in common, so she hears it. So she's getting more frustrated. And while no one's really paying attention, she undoes her manacle on one end, and one of the guards goes, well, yeah, the halfling has to be telling the truth. He's a respectable shop owner. He doesn't do anything wrong. Obviously, it's this beast over here, and when she hears the word beast, she just goes insane. She takes a dagger, drops to the ground basically, and impales it into his foot so he can't move. Which starts this whole chain of combat, where everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. Jace tries to tackle her again. He misses. The other guard slashes just clear across her back, opening up this huge gash. The bard, close quarter combat. I'm going to stay out of this. And Raina, Carly's character, goes, well, I'm going to, try to help. Well, she tries to tackle the first round. It doesn't quite take. Second round comes. We're back at the top of the order. The half-orc stabbed him first round with a dagger, pulls out of her sleeve, she has a punching dagger, and punches him in the back of the Achilles tendon. Not enough to sever it, but enough to make sure that he just thud. He passes out from pain, and he'll probably never walk the same again. Other city guard notices this, tries to take another swing at her. He misses. The team of adventurers subdues her, gets her taken down. They holding her down to the ground. And the other guardsman kind of walks up and puts a blade to her throat and goes, just give me a reason. Just give me a reason, you little whore. And Jace's character, dude, you need to calm down. We have her subdued. And the halfling is now talking to the bard, and he's like, well, you need to take care of this, just get her out of here. And they start talking in the language of the good folk, because the bard picked that up in her travels across the desert. Well, as they talk a little bit more, she starts making threats at him. If you watched the first video, you saw the description. There was the 40 rules to trading and keeping and earning profit in the desert. Well, she quotes one of the rules to him is, it would be a shame if word of mouth got out that you're cheating your customers. So the halfling kind of goes, well, are you trying to extort me? He's like, she just kind of tells me, good folk, I'm not trying. This is happening. So he thinks about this for a while, and she's making a pretty good case. He kind of just goes, all right. But I can't look weak, either. I can't just drop these charges. You're going to have to do something about these guards. Hint, hint, wink, wink, let's murder. And she's, So they have these negotiations back and forth, and good folk, and everybody else is just kind of just sitting there in the corner waiting, because this conversation is taking about 2 minutes in game time, and it took about 5 minutes in real time, because there's the prerequisite of, I'm saying this in good folk, this is what's being said, and that's followed by, well, just give me a second to think. So I always give the players just a little bit of time to think, so they say what they want to say, not what just blurts out of their mouth. Sorry about scratching my nose, it's just itchy for some reason. It's not itchy when I'm off camera, but when I get on camera today, it's just, So, with all that going on, the negotiation finally comes down to, okay, I will get the guards to ignore that any of this ever happened, including the physical violence, if I get these items from my friend Reyna, because she has very little gear. The halfling goes, okay. So the bard uses suggestion, and the guards leave, and they just kind of forget about the situation. Not completely forgetting, like, well, this happened, but it's like, they just don't have a vested interest in it anymore. So, with that in mind, Jace kind of goes, going to make a mental note of this, that you're doing that. Oh, sorry, again, about the nose. I think it's because I have the ceiling fan on and there's dust coming off. So, they leave, and they take the half-orc with them. And the half-orc has had a little bit of time to calm down, and is now manticled, has her feet in manacles, her arms in manacles, and another set of manacles connecting the two. It's taken outside to the back, and Jace is like, well, can you talk without getting an attitude or being a smartass? And she's like, I don't know, can I? Do you think I have the capability of talking to a human in common? It's just so challenging. She's just aggressively being angry, but now holding conversation. She's verbally lashing out, not physically. So they go back and forth for a while, and he's just trying to get her to calm down so they can have a conversation. And finally he has enough of it, and he just goes, all right, I'm taking you to the guards. You can serve time. Starts taking him away. Reyna goes, well, wait, didn't she say she knew about books? Because, that she during their little banter back and forth, she mentions that she's an exotic dancer, she's a bookkeeper, and that she's a book binder. She has all these different things that she's in her skill sets. And he just goes, doesn't matter. He's ready to take her away. And finally, the group kind of convinces him, well, let's stop for a second, let's go this. And he asked her again, well, can you hold a conversation, without getting angry? And she just snaps at this point, and she goes, you keep asking about a book and what I know about books. You want me to calm down and not get angry, the one thing I don't apparently have the capability of doing. So outside of that scope, what is it that you want from me? What are you trying to accomplish here? What is your agenda? You have yet to even introduce yourself to me or ask what my name is. You have ordered me around town. You have told me to sit, stand, not get angry. It's like, what? I don't know who the hell you people are or what the hell you want. And I just saw it in Jonathan's face. He had a thought, and he froze for a second. He's like, shit! He had that face. He was like, it's not often that I have an NPC dick him over so badly in this verbal dialogue, but it happens. And you see it, like, that look, and like Jace is having that look too of just, shit, we haven't introduced ourselves. We haven't. He's like, yeah, yes, I've been trying to get her side of the story, and but it's like, I've just, shit. He didn't have any words. He knew he was kind of in the wrong this time because, okay, I've introduced myself as a city guard, and I said, well, I'm an adventurer, but no, I never took the time to ask her name. I never took the time to introduce myself. So, after that, you see Jonathan kind of get his thoughts back together, and he's like, well, I am Jace. And he introduces Reyna, and then he introduces Belle. And she goes, very nice to meet you, I am Vola White. And they start having a conversation. And it's interesting because this character who's been so hostile and so angry, once given the courtesy of, hello, I am, who are you, suddenly opens up, suddenly starts talking, holding conversation. And it was in that moment that it was just, there was just a moment of peace and clarity where I knew all of my players were engaged in the story. 110%. There was no thoughts about electronic devices. There was no thought about the room we were all sitting in. It was a thought just about this moment. And it was a great moment. So they start talking. And they keep talking. And so it gets to an agreement of, let's go to the tavern. Jace goes, I'm not going to give you weapons back just yet. You can have them when you leave town. So, okay. They go to a tavern because he doesn't want to take her home. They sit down, they hand her the book, she starts reading over it, she starts trying to figure out what's going on. And she gives them a lot of information they've already got, like, well, it's a mage's book, it's a spell book. She says, but the runes are interesting because they're done with such an even hand. And none of these notes were written like notes, they were written to be read, kind of thing. Whereas somebody's notes, they don't take that extra time to slow down and write everything out because you can read your own handwriting. But when you're writing for somebody else, you always take that little bit of extra effort. She doesn't make the connection that it's dwarven leather, and they don't tell her, but she says that it's seamless leather, that someone took one piece of leather and perfectly sculpted it with the intent of the stones being there, and that the diamond dust, however it was embedded, it's not coming out. She talks about the expert sewing of the pages together. She goes into this elaborate detail, and I'm like, well, that's great, but can you tell us anything else? She tells, oh, I need some more time, I need just, give me a second to figure things out. She's like, maybe a night, maybe two. And they go, okay. Well, she goes, there is somebody who might know something about it, though. A goblin named Nug. N-U-G, Nug. And he lives in the Goblin Ghetto somewhere in Old Hearth. Well, at first everybody's like, let's go adventure. And Belle goes, well, let me go do this. I have a particular set of skills that could help Jace, well, what are your particular skills? She's like, well, I'm a bard. I blend in a little bit better. He's like, oh, okay. So he goes in there. Belle leaves. The rest of the group gets a room somewhere for the half-orc to just study the book. Well, Belle still hasn't told the group that she's a Feyre and has the ability to shapeshift. So she transforms into a goblin and goes explores the ghettos. She doesn't have the ability to speak goblin, so it becomes rather a chore in finding other goblins that speak common, not their native tongue. So it's kind of hard. So she spends a good chunk of the night trying to do this. She, after making her gather information checks, making her bardic knowledge checks over time, figures out where this place is. It's this little hut at the end of a street called Goodwin. Yes, Goodwin. The goblins don't get to name their own streets because all the streets and everything else was named by the humans who ran this place, and then the subsequent minorities moved in over time. I actually took that idea from I'm waving at somebody right now because they're waving at me. You can't see them, but right off screen someone's waving at me. Sorry about that. They're outside knocking on a window because I'm in here recording. So, anyways, the idea from that was the last house on, I can't even, the person off screen just really threw me off my rhythm. I'm sorry about that. But it was another idea I'd gotten from a book I'd read once. So, whatever the minority is, the name of the street doesn't apply because the street was there before the minority came in. And they're still trying to get my attention, I'm sorry. Wow, this video is going to be a little long because I got ADHD all of a sudden. She gets close to the house, and it's just this ungodly smell, and I make her make a fortitude save or else be sickened. And takes notice of things, and just takes them to the room the hut is. It's this rounded hut. It's the only hut in the ghetto that has clay bricks on top of the roof, and that the opening of it isn't a door, but rather braided straw just to close off the entrance. And so she takes all this information in, and then she leaves, gets to the end of the Goblin Ghetto, turns back into her elven form, and goes and relays the information to the rest of the group. Well, Jace goes, it's the middle of the night, I don't feel comfortable attacking this place. Or, not attacking, but visiting. And so they're like, well, what do we want to do? How do we want to do this? And there's that moment of, well, let's just sleep on it. Jace takes position at the front of the door. Reyna's character is like, well, I'm going to take some of these things that I got from the halfling shopkeeper. I'll make a little nest on the floor so I can sleep on the ground. The Feyre, Belle, was like, well, I'm going to go wash up first. So she leaves her room. So I have my NPC in the room. I'm taking the bed. Nobody else called it. Belle gets back in the room. I wanted the bed. Even Jace. Why didn't you say it before you left? Oh. So she ends up sleeping at a table in a chair. Next morning comes. They all gear up. They don't... Because of how the smell was described to them, they all forego eating breakfast and going to take care of this problem first. Well, they get to the goblin side of town, the goblin ghettos, and they knock on the door and they walk in, and there's this goblin standing over this huge cauldron, mixing and stirring, and that's where this putrid smell is coming from. Horrid smell. And the goblin's first line, which I wrote, I was like, ask me not what's in my family stew, for it is a secret brew. It's just, you're like, alright, well, this is already, something isn't right here, and I feel uncomfortable. they start trying to have conversations, and it becomes very clear very quickly that this goblin has like 4 or 5 personalities. There's the one that rhymes. Another one comes from, they're trying to talk to him, like, well, we had a question for you. Okay, well, what's your question? And he's paused for like, they're talking, and he just paused for about a minute, just had that look. And they're having this conversation about, well, what should we ask and how should we say it, you know. And after a minute, he just snaps, oh, you can ask a question? And like, suddenly he's aggressive. And so he kept going through all these different ends of the spectrum. Angry, happy, silly, sad, you know, everything that he could be at different points. And so finally it's agreed to let Vola, my NPC, have a conversation with him in Goblin because nobody else speaks it. So they're having this conversation back and forth, and Vola after a while goes, okay. And they're going to show him the book. She talked about the book. They take the book out, and the Feyre, Belle, lets him look at it, and he actually takes a bite out of it. No! Because everybody else has said, they just told him, it's made out of Dwarven leather, and, you know, they told him everything else they've been told up to this point, and Reyna, the night before, had been curious, and she asked, can I lick the book? At first, like, no. And fine, Reyna, you can lick the book. So they let Reyna lick the book. So when they handed it to the goblin to look at, Reyna in the back, the book tastes bad. Book tastes bad. Goblin, ha! Tastes alright to me. They quickly take the book away from her. He tries to take a bite out of it. And it's a little more conversation, but they know it's not going anywhere fast. And so, through some miscommunications, it feels like Jace is threatening the goblin, so the goblin kind of gets nervous. He casts a sleep spell, but nobody in the room is affected. So all they see is this pink, pixie-like dust leave the spoon, cover the room, falls down. They're like, well, that was different. Okay. Nobody, the bard didn't think to make a spellcraft check, so they're all just sitting there. Alright, well that happened. He's able to cast spells. This is how great it is. The goblin is so crazy that when he starts chanting incomprehensible arcana, they're like, well, is he a caster or is he just insane again? You know, they don't know. But it becomes rather apparent that he's starting to take hostile actions, and Jace threatens them again, you know, once they figure out, okay, he's casting. Jace actually goes from a misunderstanding of threatening to a full-on, you're going to listen. And this pot he's stewing, this pot that he's been working with, he finally asks the pot for help. He's like, my ingredients, come to my aid, serve your master. The group waits. They're like, they're still not sure what this guy is or how insane he is. Nothing happens, but then I had everybody's scores written down. I make a listen checks for all of them, and only Reyna hears it. But this whispering starts coming from the book. And then, surely enough, one of the onyx stones flies off and goes into the pot. Well, Jace is standing there, holding the goblin, and, while trying to talk to the goblin, 2 skeletons jump out of the pot. Now they're standing in the pot, and they make slashing attacks at Jace, and they take him down to about 2 health. And he's like, what the? He doesn't know what the hell this thing is. He's just, oh, okay, well, that just happened. I'm sorry, it wasn't 2 health. He took him down to half health. He was just not ready for that. This battle ensues, and there's 2 skeletons fighting, the goblin's throwing spells. Finally, the group takes care of the 2 skeletons. One actually never got out of the pot, so its ingredients just plop back in there. The other one kind of fell apart outside of the cauldron. And the goblin met his unfortunate end because Jace took his great axe and just equally divided the head into 2 equal parts. Well, while doing that, though, Jace notices that the essence of the goblin goes into the pot. And they wait, and they start seeing the cauldron's legs start to move, and suddenly it gets enough confidence in its strength that it starts charging out of the hut. And Jace, being the man and being like, we need to go stop that pot. Vola, the half-orc, nope, no, not chasing after an animated pot. And he's like, well, it's our responsibility. We'll at least get the gem out of that that got thrown in there. So they go chase down this pot, get it down to an alley, and I mean, this thing is a horrific smell even to goblins. So there's goblins and hobgoblins and some orcs. They see this pot running, they smell it, they don't even bother with it. They're just like, nope. Like, never before have 3 humanoids been able to run down a goblin ghetto without a single goblin going, you're in the wrong neighborhood. Like, no, they didn't want to mess with anybody who was chasing this pot. And the pot's splashing around, so this bile stew is falling on the ground. So you don't even need to have track to follow this thing. They follow it to a dark alley, and they're like, Jace said something like, it's at the end of the road now. It turns around, and it has developed a face like animated objects do occasionally. And it has one eye high up, too high, like almost in the forehead. The other one's drooping down too much, and the goblin nose is bent and crooked. And the thing... I made that sound like 9 times, and they're like, they didn't know to laugh or to run, because it's like, well, that's a funny sound, but, okay, it's on this pot that's coming after us. They cornered the pot, so it can only fight. So 4 things, a fairy, a lycanthrope blood, a human, and a half-orc are all fighting this pot. And when the killing blow is dealt, I love to give my adventurers that moment where like, we succeeded, we won. This was not that day, though. The pot starts to, after the killing blow's given, it came from an arrow. Ting! You see the pot start. And the thing fades. The face fades away. And all you just see is all the contents of the pot flies up about 30 feet in the air and then just rains down on the adventurers. All the players are mad at me because I'm the DM and I just did that, but my saving grace was that I had the half-orcs trying to kill Jace afterwards, because Jace is down to 1 HP after this encounter, and she has her hands around his neck trying to kill him, and like he's having to defend himself. She's like, I'll kill you, you son of a... because they're all covered in this. There was no escaping this vial. It probably got some passersby too, but they're covered in this stuff and they want to get the hell away from it too. So now they have to go to a nice bathhouse. And they get to the bathhouse, which is on the nice side of town. They left the goblin ghettos, went to the nice side of town, smelling like this, so they weren't making any friends. And Jace tries to engage the doorman. Hello, my good son. Might I be... The doorman takes one with cash up front now, 10 gold apiece, no entry otherwise. And they're like, that's a little extensive, isn't it? 10 gold, kind of. Either take 10 gold or you leave. So they all pay their 10 gold, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we've got to do this. Bathhouse. They walk in, the men are separated from the women, and so it's Jace put to do himself by himself. And he gets to this point where you're just in this giant hot tub, not a hot tub, but a tub with hot water in it. There's probably a little fire brewing under it. And it's just him and this dwarf sitting there. And the dwarf looks at him. Do I know you, sir? And Jace, I don't believe we do. Dwarf stands up, says, I could swear I knew you from the... the water's just high enough that Jace isn't seeing Dwarven Dong, but he's making that V out. He's like, thank God the water's a little murky or else it's going to be extremely uncomfortable. The dwarf says, well, I was sitting at the bar when you came in and got your mission the other day, and I was also still there when you were talking about, leaving, when they wanted you just to leave, and you're like, well, you need to investigate more. And he says, I was quite impressed with your initiative. And so they start having a conversation. Jace's a little uncomfortable because this naked dwarf is standing in front of him. And while they're having a conversation, the dwarf finally walks away, and you can just see this dwarf covered in hair everywhere, including his ass, and like Jace is just having to see this thing sit back down. And the dwarf says, well, I have a mission that I need some experienced adventurers to go on with me. And Jace, well, what's the mission? He talks about how he won a mine in a game of canasta, but he's not sure if it's a good deal or not, because he was playing against a half-dragon and a suspiciously healthy gnome. In my world, gnomes are dying out. So to see one that's healthy, that raises some eyebrows. But playing against those two in a game of canasta, he won a mine. He says that, the mission's not going to be anytime soon, but I'd like to start preparing people to go on this assignment with me. So he said, okay. Dwarf stands up again, shakes Jace's hand, and is like, I like the cut of your jib. And Jace is on this one, I really wish you'd just get your jib out of my face. So while that conversation was going on the other end, the three women, the half-orc, the fairy, and the lycanthrope blood are all sitting in a bath too. And the further you walked into this place, there was an anti-magic zone. So now the fairy is exposed with her horns, her tail, and the wings on her back, which are folded up. And the half-orc's like, okay, what the hell are you? And, she's having that moment like, okay, you didn't look like this before. So there was a nice little conversation about everybody's origins in this little group. The lycanthrope blood, who doesn't know anything past 6 months ago, the fairy from across the desert, and the half-orc, who is too scrawny and frail to join any orc community, but too orc to be accepted by any human community. So it's a nice little band of misfits. They get out of everything, and they go back outside. They get out before Jace does, so Jace still hasn't seen the fairy in its full form. And that's where we ended the night there. There's room for more adventures. There's room for more things. No. We did not end there. Sorry. I was going to cut you short of something. They live there. They hear about that. Then, when they go back to the room they rented, they finally take a look at this book, because they knew nothing threw something off the book. The book threw something off. And they're about to cut this book open when the book reveals that it's a living creature. It's not a mimic. It starts giving its origin that it was an animated object that got sentience and then became a caster. And just goes, I think that our time is done here. I need to be leaving. The book not only can open itself, it can float in midair, its eye can protrude out so it can read its own pages. And the book's going, I'm going to go look for a new host, like the one you killed. And, I think we're done here. Well, they wanted to fight it, but it showed that it knew hold person, it had suggestion. After a few of its castings, they were like, okay, we're just going to let this thing leave. So it's a floating book that has sentience, that talked like this. All of its dialogue was as such. They didn't want to mess with it. They were done. They agree, okay, the book can leave. The book uses Unseen Servant. Opens a window, takes a sheet, wraps itself around its own sheet, and then uses Unseen Servant to grab itself and just fling it out a window. So, at the end of the night, they have a new adventure on the horizon, and they've all developed an appreciation and fear of books. Because one particular book had the ability to just talk, hold dialogue, and they don't really know how many suggestions this book gave them along the way. They were just able to catch the ones that they didn't fail. So, it's a fun little thing to, rest assured, I think I'm going to bring the book back later on, but I wanted to give them something to fear and not fully comprehend that wasn't a human or a monster. It's a book. So, I'm not sure what the future holds for that plot device. But the mechanics behind it were it was a book, animated object, because it has to be a non-magical item. Once it was an animated object, someone then took the time and effort to write spells in it, and then used Awaken Construct to give it a mind, so now it had the tools to learn the spells in it. Rather creepy concept. But it's a caster, much like an undead. It doesn't have a constitution score, but it has an innate ability to blend in a lot better. And it, again, over 2 nights, it waited until the absolute last moment to reveal that it was alive, so it has patience. So they're not sure what this book wants or how it was. They let it go. They just, no, we're not going to mess with this book. So that's how their night ended. Scared and confused with the offer of a job in the future. Once again, guys, if you like this, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Alright, I hope everybody's having a good day, and I'll talk to you later.